I was like, well, I haven't had sex before. So I was like, do you guys have anything for virgins? We go to the strip club and I had never seen a naked man before in my life. And then all of a sudden, all these guys are giving me attention. Just like, well, it's not actually having sex. It's fine. So I started doing it as like a game. I had seen so many people and done so many unmentionable things that I thought that my mind could never be restored. And I'm like, God, I know I'm going to hell if you don't help me. Help me.
Hello and welcome back to the Almost False podcast, where I interview regular people with incredible stories. Today's story is one that I think a lot of you are going to relate with. It's a story of a good Christian girl who, one bad decision at a time, traded away her purity and dignity for the things of this world and ended up sleeping with over 100 different men in the span of a few years. Today she explains how she got to that point and how she was miraculously taken out of it. Her name is Gayle, and this is her story.
At about like 12 or 13, I started not being able to stay awake at all, like for anything. And it ended up being candida was what it was. And it was so bad that it literally clogged the lymph nodes by my brain to the point where I had narcolepsy symptoms. So I was like an AB student and very intelligent. And I literally went down to being like a C average because I couldn't stay awake to even read a page in a book. And it was really scary, and a lot of people just thought that I wasn't getting sleep at night, that I was doing drugs. I hung out with the druggies at school when I moved because those were the only people that would accept me, and that's the way that I looked all the time. I looked like I was on drugs all the time. I was like, just half like there because I couldn't stay awake to save my life. And, like, teachers would mess with me. I had one that blew a whistle in my ear, one that banged on my desk. I'd get yelled at, and I couldn't control it. I didn't know what was going on. And a lot of people they're like, oh, yeah, just go to sleep, Gayle. And it was like the running joke with me.
So, I mean, with a condition like that, it's very easy to see how it would be difficult to fit in with everybody because you're always asleep, and that's something that people would make fun of. But let's move to the next, I guess, turning point of your life, and that happened when you were 17. You were invited to a party, and it wasn't any kind of party. So, can you explain what kind of party it was and why that had such a big negative impact on you?
Well, to preface that, I I had like a really big interest in guys, and like just like any teenage girl does. But um I couldn't get any guys' attention. And I was very outspoken, very opinionated, still am, and I'm just, guys don't really like someone that's gonna like run right up to them and be like, hey, I like you. Well, that was me. So a lot of guys were just kind of like, ugh, ow, and then they don't even know how to take that half the time. So, um, my friend's mom invited us to a pure romance party, and I was almost 18, and we had just graduated high school because I graduated at 17, and we went to this thing, and I didn't know anything about sex toys or like I didn't even masturbate. Okay. Like I wasn't like all the other people. Like, I mean, I, of course, every kid gets, like sexual urges, whatever, but like I was never exposed to anything that was bad. Like we didn't have, I didn't accidentally walk in on my parents. I didn't get exposed to porn. Nobody told me about masturbation. I had my cousin mention it to me one time when I was like 12. I didn't even know what she was talking about. So I was like, okay, well, we go to this party and they're talking about all this stuff. And I was curious because, I'm like, well, okay, this is kind of cool. All right, what's this? And I was like, well, I haven't had sex before, so I was like, do you guys have anything for virgins? And I was just like, oh yeah, we got this vibrator, da da da. And so I bought it, and it was just like all downhill from there because I kept using it to the point where I was in pain. Shortly after I turned 18, I got a job at a party store, and I had my first like, feminine exam. And the lady was talking to me about, they ask you all those questions like, do you feel safe at home? Are you depressed? Are you this? Are you that? Are you sexually active? I was like, no. I was like, but I was like, I have a vibrator. I was like, I don't know. She's like, how often do you use that? And I was like, I don't know, a few times a day, maybe, It's just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You got to stop doing that. I'm like, why? And she's like, you can completely desensitize yourself to the point where when you actually do, have a sexual partner that you won't be able to feel anything. I'm like, oh, okay. So I tossed it in the trash because I wasn't addicted at that point. Like I was when I had it, but I was just kind of like, okay. And I just went on to the next thing. Well, then it escalates. The same person that invited us to the pure romance thing, one of my friends had a birthday and we turned 19. Well, in Canada, you can drink and go to strip clubs at 19, which is the dumbest thing ever. And so we went to the strip club that her mom went to when she was younger. And she had like a picture with all the strippers and whatnot. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I hung out with these people and they were really great and nice to me all the time, and uh, there were things going on at my house where there was just some, things that I felt like I was lacking from my own, family because they were dealing with some different things. I'm not really going to go into their business, but I really wanted, to hang out with my mom and do the kind of things that my friend's mom would do. So I just kind of latched onto her like she was my second mom at that point. So we go to Canada and we go to the strip club and I had never seen a naked man before in my life. So there's that. And then all of a sudden all these guys are giving me attention. And I'm like, well, this is awesome. Okay. Yeah. All right. Apparently I'm not as ugly as I thought I was. And so um I started working at that party store. So even after that whole ordeal, every weekend I started going out there by myself and going to that particular strip club, which doesn't exist anymore. It was called Danny's and it was in Windsor. And I would go there every weekend and they knew what perfume I wore. They knew me by name. They hung out with me. They all acted like I was like important. They even gave me their phone numbers and different things like that, So I thought that like I was the end all be all really, but they were only doing it just because they wanted my money. And I didn't realize that till maybe about a year in because all I wanted was some attention. I just guys would not give me attention. And the ones that would give me attention, I wasn't interested in. Like I had this one guy that went to prom with me, um, and it wasn't anyone that I wanted to go with. And I don't mean to be mean, but it's just like some people you're interested in, some people you're not. So like I was used to it's either I'm interested in them, they're not interested in me, or they're interested in me, I'm not interested in them.
Right. That's why it's such a big turning point. That's what I was talking about earlier, because you had a lot of trouble fitting in high school, and that made you hard to like from other people. That probably made you a lot less popular than maybe you should have been. And not that it's a good thing to be popular, but it's definitely a bad thing to not have anyone to talk to. So when you got to the strip club and got attention from these men, you never had that. And like you mentioned, that's what you were looking for. So you had no idea what you're doing. And then you're giving away all your money to these people that really don't care about you, but you really, like, you don't realize it. So, I mean, that's pretty sad, but there's a lot more stuff that happened. And that was kind of the beginning. I mean, we're still in the beginning of your story. The next thing is when you made a friend that was into the new age, and she really took you away from that innocent and that Christian life that you had when you were younger, trying to keep your purity. And you had kind of been exposed, but at that point you still were wanting to keep your purity, even if you were doing these things. But when you met that lady, that all changed. Can you explain what happened?
Yeah. Well, and just to make sure I clarify, like granted, even though I was like really alienated in high school, I was a floater. So I would always be the person that'd be like, oh, it's just Gayle. Like I could go up and talk to anybody, but I was never really friends with anyone. So I was just kind of the one that was like, hey, how's it going? Because I would know people's names and, try to be friendly to them, but they're just kind of like, okay, cool. But, that type of thing. Because everything's just awkward in high school. Anyway, so I get this other job working at a department store. And I started working with this girl who claimed she could see dead people.
Okay.
Well, as much as I got exposed to the Holy Spirit as a child, the whole like spiritual warfare thing was never really taught to me. So when it came to like the devil and the evil side of things, I thought, okay, well, I got Jesus, so I'm good, so it's whatever. And I knew that the things that I was exposing myself to was wrong, but I felt like at that point as a teenager, there was just so much things that I didn't, get exposed to, that when I actually did get exposed to it, that it was so intriguing to me that I had to explore that option, I guess. So when my friend would tell me, she was like, talked about having an oral fixation and all this other stuff. I'm like, what? Okay. So then she started talking about just doing things with guys and whatnot. And I'm like, she's like, well, it's not actually having sex. It's fine, And I'm like, well, she's like, you got a crush on that guy. Like, why don't you do something with it, And I'm like, well, and so it got to a point where I did that and I started doing that all the time, trying to get his attention, and come to find out he was not only playing me, but he was playing another girl that he lived with. So, um, yeah, it was like a whole big thing. And I got painted as the black sheep out of the whole situation because supposedly I'm just the hussy on the side, whatever. I don't even know. So I was pretty devastated when all of it went down. And I started going on Tinder and finding guys to just do that with. I would never actually have sex with them, but I racked up about 80 to 100 guys just doing everything but, because I immediately saw no value in myself. And I had so many people that rejected me that spirit of rejection literally just took like its foothold and just smashed me down to probably closest to the lowest point that I've ever been.
So this is going back to seeking attention in the wrong places because you didn't feel like you had enough. And you went on, a ridiculous amount of dates with these guys. But you were still a virgin at that point. And that changed when you were 26. Can you explain what happened that night, your thought process, and why your whole life flipped even for worse than what you were?
Yeah. Well, also to preface this, I became, in the process of doing these things, I became really judgmental. So I started judging people for just all kinds of really, really dumb things. And I ended up going through some form of every single thing that I judged somebody for. And one of those particularly things that I judged somebody on was being a single mother. I was like, I'll never be that. And guess who is?
Yeah.
So I went to my friend's place. She had just gotten married. We became pretty close. I was in college, and she got married pretty early at like 20. And I made her wedding cake for her wedding, and we became pretty chummy. So my friend had gotten me a flight to go see her because she was stationed in another state in like Washington with her husband at the time. And they were very, very, very Christian, very spiritually, like aware of things. And at that point, I wasn't. Like, I knew everything. I could keep up with anyone, really, pretty much, if you talked about God because of my background, but my heart wasn't in the right place at all. And so when I went to stay at her house, we had a conversation and I was talking about kissing some guy. Something that went down, I forget, but somebody that I was into at the time. And she goes, I don't want to hear any of that. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I was just trying to adjust my verbiage, but I got mad and I was like, dude, you got married at 20. Okay. Like, you can have sex with your husband anytime you want. I was like, I still got my V card. I was like, I don't even want to hear about it, you know? So I was like, this is all I got right now. And I was like, I'm pushing 30. She's like, I know people well into their 30s that are still virgins waiting for the right person for them. I'm like, are you kidding me? I literally went from anger to hate at that point. Like, I literally felt it. Like, I felt it in my system. I felt that change. And I literally got to that point where I'm like, I hate you. And I I got to like my back to Michigan and I was like, I'm done. I'm like, I'm done doing this. I'm done waiting. I've prayed about it. I've asked for everything. I was like, I know that I'm not some swamp thing. Okay. So there's got to be somebody out there that would marry me. So I'm like, this is stupid. I was like, all my other friends who have gotten married that aren't Christians, they had sex before marriage. So why can't I? So I'm like, I'm going to go to the bar and the first guy that hits on me, I'm going to, as long as he's not ugly, I'm going to have sex with him. In the back of my mind, I'm like, Gayle, nobody ever hits on you ever. So why do you think that that's going to happen now? Well, somebody did that night. So I got done singing karaoke and I leave and the guy's like, hey, you sing pretty good out there. I was like, okay, he was standing by his motorcycle and it's like, all right, this is pretty decent looking guy, and I was like, so you single? He's like, yeah, so happens I am. I'm like, oh, want my number? He's like, all right. So we hung out the next day and because I was 26, I told him, I'm like, look, I was like, this whole thing is literally just because I want to lose my virginity. He started laughing. He's like, so you tell all the guys? I was like, uh, no. I was like, I am a virgin. And he was like, wait, seriously? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, all right. Well, long story short, that all happened. And then I'm at the gas station afterwards. And in like movies where, all the girls get really emotional and, it becomes some big, huge thing or whatever. I was so calloused over at this point that I didn't feel anything. And I was like, it's like, wasn't that big of a deal. I was like, it's kind of cool. All right. Well, maybe I'll do a little more of this. So I started doing Tinder hookups like any chance I could get. And I knew it was wrong, but I was like, at some point, I'll bring God back in the situation, but I'm just trying to find my footing right now. I was like, I gotta find a guy. And at that point, I started to venture into the porn thing because anytime I would go on these hookups, it was get in, get off, get out. No one wanted to actually do anything for me. It was all about the guy and him getting off, but nobody wanted to take care of me. Nobody wanted to treat me right. The most I got out of any of it was a burger at Wendy's. And usually I'd be like, I would get this response of, I've got somebody that's coming over, like friends or whatever. So can you kind of like get out? And I'm like, okay. So I got really depressed and I started looking at porn because I liked movies a lot. And I just thought that maybe if I could lose myself in a movie and do the whole masturbation thing, then maybe I would feel a little less lonely.
Hey, it's me, and I'm sorry for interrupting this amazing story, but I just wanted to remind you that we have extra content on Locals that you should check out, like the beginning of this conversation or the after show, which talks about the takeaways and practical applications of the testimonies. Go to almostfalse.locals.com or download the Locals app to get free access, unless you want to be missing out. Anyway, the links are in the description. Now, let's get back to the story. So before we get into the porn idea, I want to ask you, because from 23 to 26, you went on hookups, still being a virgin. You said between 80 to 100 people within 3 years. Now, from 26 up until the point that we're talking about, you started actually, having sex with these guys. How many of them did you go on to? How frequent was that?
Pretty frequent. I racked up over 100. I'd say less than 120, but that's probably about where I was at, because it became a game, because the girl that I originally was schooled on all of this in a very bad way, but she used to keep numbers, and she would be like telling me all of these things, and she would tell me details, and she's like, oh yeah, I just keep a certain amount of numbers, and I like kind of the whole notch in the bedpost thing. Well, she was like the girl version of that. So I started doing it as like a game, because I felt like the only way that I could feel worth something was because I would get more people racked up, and I would find the hottest guy that I could get my hands on, and then I felt less ugly and less worthless for that time that I would hang out with them. But then they never wanted to talk to me again afterwards. So then I would kind of go on this roller coaster where my emotions would just be up and down and up and down. And it was actually it's really depressing.
Right. Because you were looking for attention, you were looking for love from all these men, and you thought that you would get that by, having sex with them. And it turned out to be the opposite. So you fell into depression. And that's when we get into, the adult content side of it. You got addicted to it pretty hard because of all these interactions. So I'll let you continue where you were at and talking about how that transpired in your life.
Yeah. So basically I would just go through these bouts like any addict. Like, you would, get your fix, and then you could go a little bit of time, and then you needed another fix. So and the thing is I would try to get away from it. I would try to get out of it. I would delete the app, and then I would get the app back again. And then I'm like, well, maybe if I try something different, like maybe if we try like eHarmony or Coffee Meets Bagel, or, the Bumble, or all of them. I literally, you name it, every dating app I've been on. And I've been to some of the most weird places to meet up with people. I've done some of the most really disgusting, raunchy things that I never want to happen again in my life. And all because I just wanted somebody to just pay attention to me. And I understand when these girls that feel completely worthless, that no one cares about them. Like, I understand where they're coming from.
Right.
Thankfully, I don't feel that anymore, but it's definitely not good.
Yeah. And that changed when you got to 31 because you became pregnant. So can you tell the story of what happened that night and how that flipped your life upside down?
Yeah. So, in the process of all of this, I was trying to get my music career started. I'm a musician, singer, songwriter, and that's how I dealt with most of my pain and depression. I would put it in my songs. So, like when I would deal with those bouts and those different people that I would meet, they would bring songs out of me. So then I started getting this mentality where, like, if I ran out of songs, sometimes that would even fuel it too, because I'm like, I need to put more misery in my life, because then it's going to bring all of this creativity out of me. So I looked at it in this really messed up way to actually do all that. And at this point, we had our 10-year reunion from high school, and I ended up throwing it because our president in our class was busy. So I threw this big party, and I tried to find one of our classmates, and I couldn't find him because he was in jail. And after that, then I was on Tinder, and I ran into the guy that wasn't at our 10-year reunion. I knew of him, and I saw him passing in the hallway, and I didn't really know the ins and outs that everybody else did because I wasn't awake. I was asleep all the time. So I didn't know why this guy went to jail. I didn't know all of the different things, but I saw him on Tinder. He didn't even look like the guy from high school, but when we started talking, I realized that that's who he was. I was like, huh, well, that's got to be a safe bet, right? Because I went to high school with him, so he can't be that bad.
So you started talking to this guy from that you knew from high school on Tinder, and then you find out a bunch of things about him, and that's the guy that ends up, getting pregnant. So starting from there, can you explain what happened?
So we started talking, and he's like, hey, do you want to come over? He's like, I'll cook you dinner. He's like, I'll get whatever drink you want. He's like, I got a hot tub, this and this and this. And I'm like, he's going to cook me dinner? He's like, he's got a hot tub? Okay, yeah, I'm in. So I told him a specific wine that he could only get like one or two places, and he went out and bought it. So he waited on me hand and foot, and talk about like spider getting one of the little things to like go into its web type of thing. Because as soon as I got caught, man, it was hook, line, and sinker. Like I was done because he nursed the same beer the whole night. I drank the whole bottle of wine. I started things up because I knew where it was going to go. But I wasn't on birth control because I tried getting an IUD. That didn't work. I tried taking birth control. It made me sick. And so I just had to stick with condoms. So I had to be really careful, like how I went about things and made sure when my period was, who I slept with, whatever. So I kept track of that stuff pretty good. And I popped the plan B like Skittles. And to think that I didn't have any complications during my pregnancy is literally by the grace of God, because this stuff's not good for you. So we got into the whole thing, and he's like, hey, you want to go upstairs? I'm like, okay, cool. So I stumble up to his room, and we had already gone in the hot tub and, everything like that. And he treated me like I was, the end all be all, at least as far as all the other experiences that I had. So that was really the only good one that I had to compare it to. So I was like, well, this is better than the drive through at Wendy's. So, and everything was clean and pristine and, so I was like, okay, it's like, oh, let's do this. So we get into the whole thing, and then he's like, I want to take the protection off. I go, no. And I was drunk, but I've never had a problem with like knowing what's going on. And I was like, my muscle and like motor function was off, but I knew what was going on. And he kept asking me. I kept saying no. And I told him why. And he kept asking and asking. And I just got to this point where I was just like, I thought I was going to pass out. And the thing is I don't do that. So I was like, fine, just shut up. And I was like, please, just don't get off of me, please. I was like, and I passed out. He's like, don't worry, I'll take care of you. And bam, I'm out. And then I leave his house. I was pissed. And I didn't know if he did or didn't. And somehow I forgot to take plan B. That is not like me. I never do that. So I leave his house, and then I'm thinking, okay, whatever. And a couple weeks later, I started getting morning sickness. I went to a party store that was a few miles away, and I went to the bathroom, got a pregnancy test, and I was sitting at the parking lot over by his house, and it was just as they were closing, and I saw the two lines, and I was just sitting there like, oh, this is what every teenager feels like, because I was still living with my parents. I still am. And I literally, like, my life was going in no direction that it should. My music was just not doing anything. So I literally had nothing to show for it. I'm like, I have nothing that I can do to provide for this child. I'm going to be a single mom. This guy is a complete train wreck. He actually had felonies and was in prison, like actual prison for weapons and all kinds of stupid stuff. So I went to his house at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was like shaking it into space, like, I told you, I told you, what is wrong with you? And he's like, well, we can take care of it. He's like, calm down. He's like, you just need to like chill out. And I'm like, so, I started thinking, and I'm like, what if I do have an abortion? And I'm like, immediately the Holy Spirit's like, you're pro-life, duh. And I'm like, yeah, I am. What am I thinking? Like, pro-life. But I'm like, but I don't have anything to offer this child. Then I'm like, okay, wait, you're 31, you're not 17. You might never have another baby. You might never get married. This baby is part of you. What are you thinking? And so I was just like, why was I even considering this? So I'm in the bathroom at my house, and I'm like, okay, God. And I hadn't talked to God in a long time. And I'm like, God, I don't know. I want to have this baby, but I'm scared. And the thing that scared me the most was the disapproval of my parents, because I was always the good kid. I was always the one that did everything that I was supposed to do. And so when I did all the things that I did, it was totally under the radar and they had no idea. So I thought they were going to kick me out. I didn't know what they were going to do. And so I was like, God, you need to have my parents not yell at me if I tell them that I'm pregnant, if you want me to have this baby, or I don't know what I'm going to do. So I go downstairs and I walk in the room, and they're sitting on the couch. And my parents are like probably the most straight-laced people you could ever meet in your life. Never had a drink to their lips, like, type of thing. The only time they ever had any alcohol was when they accidentally got some at a restaurant because it was by accident, and they ended up getting buzzed by accident. So my parents are sitting on the couch, and they're just like this, like they had like smoked a joint or something. And I'm like, so I got something to tell you guys, but I don't really know how to tell you. And I don't know how you're gonna take it. And they're like, what is it? And I'm like, I'm pregnant. And mom goes, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I'm sure. And my dad's like, wow, we thought this was gonna be your brother. I was like, what? And he's like, well, looks like we got some planning to do. I was like, huh? Who are you? And it's like, body snatchers, like, I was like, that was God. I was like, because if you knew my parents, trust me, it was totally God. So, yeah, that went over pretty well at that point.
That's that's funny and incredible at the same time. And I want to ask you, because we'll fast forward. You said, actually, let's let me touch on this quickly, because you talked about taking Plan B and taking other stuff, and you should not have had a nice pregnancy. And you said, by the grace of God, your daughter came out perfectly, with no complications. But when she did come out, having a daughter is a big change in somebody's life, and it changes a lot of people's lives. And so I want to ask, how did having a daughter impact your sexual behaviors that we were talking about before? Did it change or not?
Well, it did for a while, because when I got pregnant, I felt like there was this pure thing inside of me. And I'm like, I'm not going to have sex while I'm pregnant. I didn't want to defile my daughter. Like, I literally felt like I would be doing that if I did do that. But then as the pregnancy went on, um, I did, talk to different people and whatnot, guys and stuff, but I just never engaged in anything. And after I had my daughter, um, that really, woke me up as far as, I need to change my ways. But because of the fact that I also had this thought in my head, I'm like, okay, you're a single mom. You do need to find a husband. You do need to figure this out. So that convinced me to go back to doing what I was doing prior to that. But I basically just the porn was what I engaged in during the pregnancy, just because, an addict is an addict, whatever. But then after I had my daughter, I was like, okay, it started to make me into a better person, but gradually, because I was very angry inside, but not at my daughter. I was angry at myself. And I was trying to figure things out. So I started sleeping around again and still watching porn, still doing all this stuff. But it got to a point where the torment escalated. Because anyone who's involved with porn, whether they want to admit it or not, they've got all these demons like ringing in their head, whether it be images, like racing thoughts, like all kinds of different things, whether it be emotional trauma or whatever. Because as soon as you let all that in, it's, oh my gosh, it's like having a bunch of people inside your head. Like I wasn't ever schizophrenic, praise the Lord, but it's definitely not fun. And so it got to a point where even when I was working or doing whatever, because I worked as a cashier for a short time while my daughter was real little, I was finding every excuse to use my phone to look at porn, every excuse to masturbate, every excuse to whatever, because I just was like so stressed out because I was having to do all the mom stuff and then trying to figure out all of the stuff that I had gotten myself involved in and trying to be a good person and trying not to screw up with my child because I'm so screwed up that I literally got to a point where I was in my car by myself, I think driving back from like a grocery store. And I'm like, God, I know I'm going to hell if you don't help me. Help me. And I started screaming and crying and just uncontrollably, like just crying out for God to help me. And after that, I really saw God act because he did a miracle before I even changed my life around. Because I had seen so many people and done so many unmentionable things that I thought that my mind could never be restored. Because porn literally destroys your mind. Like your imagination, gone. It literally destroys it. Anyone who thinks otherwise is clearly misguided or is lying to themselves, because I had an amazing imagination before the porn and I couldn't think of anything without a perverted viewpoint. I would be in the store looking at some random person, just looking at the scenery, not like, with any intention, and some disgusting thought would just pop into my head because I was so demonized at that point. And after I cried out to God, and it wasn't some complicated prayer, it wasn't some kind of, you know, like some people think that it has to be that with God. No, you just have to know to call out the name of Jesus, because that is the name above all names. That's the name that is literally, Yahweh, Yeshua, Jesus, Holy Spirit. Like you gotta call him out and say, I need help. And he's gonna come to you, because I didn't put anything out that was anything pretty. And he showed up. And within like 24 to 48 hours, I forgot names, I forgot faces, I forgot everything that I did, except for like people that I had known for like multiple years. And even then, still, the stuff that we did is fuzzy. Like I can't even put my finger on it. And at that point, I wasn't having the sleeping issue or anything like that either. So I know for a fact, because after my daughter, it really got corrected. But I know for a fact that God literally renewed my mind. Like, I didn't know that was possible. And it went to the point of, like, when I would watch TV, I would watch like a Hallmark movie, because I really like those, that it would get to the kissing scene and it would make me uncomfortable. Like it would when you first see those things, like when you're a teenager. I remembered what that felt like. And I didn't think that that was possible anymore, because I was destroyed like 2 days prior to that. So I'm like, he he really did this. Like he literally like took my mind and rewound it, erased it, all of it.
And that changed your life completely. And it was not too long after that you got baptized and you gave your life to Jesus, right?
Yeah. I went, I found a church. I was like, Dad, I gotta go back to church. And he's like, okay, and so I I went and I was like, I need to get baptized. I was like, I want to really give my life to the Lord. I was like, there's something going on. And I talked to the pastor and everything, and she's like, okay, so I took these Bible classes, and I was going to the pastor's house like every week. And then when I got baptized, I literally felt like my life was really changed, because I had gotten baptized at 12 and I got baptized at 19. But those were two different situations and two different mindsets. And I feel like I was literally like, it- I knew for a fact that I was where I needed to be this time. And it wasn't just like those other two times were sincere, but you just know when the Holy Spirit really takes hold of your life. And when my mom came up to me after I got baptized, she goes, every night you left this house, I prayed for you. Because she was the one watching my baby while I was out doing unmentionable things. So never question the power of prayer.
Amen. God bless your mom. That's awesome.
Yeah, tell me about it. And she never got on to me about anything that I was doing. She literally just went directly to God and was like, this is what I need you to do. I need you to get her. And he did.
And to end off your story, I want to ask you a question about the relationships, because I think that's the main theme of looking for love, or kind of looking for love in the wrong places. You've looked pretty much everywhere. If you had to give advice to somebody younger or somebody that is in the same state of mind as what you used to be, after all the experiences you've had, what would it be?
Don't look for any love other than from the Father, because if we seek him first, he'll add all those things when it's the proper time. I'm still not married, but I can tell you I am not lacking anything. The devil wants us to focus on the things that we lack. He did the same thing to Eve in the garden with the tree. Thought that the one thing she lacked was the tree of good and evil. Like she had to have that one thing. No. God gives us everything that we need. The one thing that you need is Jesus. And as long as you have Jesus first in your life and you are seeking him and you are working on your relationship with him, That's all you need. And as far as relationships go, you need to just make sure that when you go on dates or when you go into these different areas, because we do get to choose who our spouse is, but lay that at his feet. Because trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him and he will direct your path. So as long as you're submitting those things to him, like, I went on this date with this person. I don't know what you want to do with this, but it's in your court. Like, I give it to you. You're the one in control. So give him control and you'll be fine. And as far as sex goes, wait, because it is not worth it. It is not worth it. And even with all of the pleasure that comes with it that people think that they're going to get, all of the regret and the torment that comes after is way, way worse. And I know that maybe guys think that they don't go through that the same way that women do because of our bodies being different, because we're more emotionally in tune. No, that's not true. It's a load of crap. So don't do it.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Almost False podcast. If you want to hear the beginning of this conversation, head over to Locals, where we post the unreleased footage from our interviews, and where we also have the after show in which you can get to know our guests more personally and hear about what their life is like now. The link is in the description. Have a great day and stay blessed.